Tēnā koutou. Ko moihau te maunga, ko waihau te awa. Ko tainui te waka ko Ngāti Tamaterā te iwi. Ko te pai o hauraki te marae. No hauraki au, I te puaki hau I Wanganui, e noho ana hau ki ahuriri. Ko nui te rini, raua ko matai au tō reinga o ka kaumātua. Ko Alan Kenny, raua ko Bettina Hill o ka kaumātua. Ko George Williams, raua ko Lorraine Kenny o ka mātua. Ko Kellyanne Simon, toku hoa wahine. Ko Simon, ko Casey, rātou ko Jasmine, aku tamariki. Ko Isaiah, ko Joseph, rātou ko Machu, aku mokopuna. Ko Tama raua ko Sunga, aku mō kai kuri. Jase Williams tōku ingoa, nō reira, tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou katoa. Ka huri au ki te reo Pākehā. Growing up as a child, I never heard the words, I love you, from my parents. To some, they're possibly just words. Maybe you heard these words often growing up. Or perhaps like me, you never heard those words at all. Well, for me, not hearing these words, coupled with other experiences in my childhood, where I felt like I wasn't seen, heard or known, where I felt like I wasn't good enough, and where I felt like I didn't belong, affected me greatly and impacted connections and relationships with those that I loved. We unknowingly carry the experiences of our childhood into our adult years if they're not processed and settled. And sadly, we will pass these on to our children and children's children. You see, I grew up in a time where children were told to get over it, to harden up, to not talk about or show our emotions and feelings. We were told not to cry because only girls cried. And if we cried, we'd be given something to really cry about. So we don't cry. We don't talk about it. And what happens is we repress and suppress all those emotions and feelings, then we bury them deep, deep down, out of sight. But trauma makes the invisible visible. Trauma is that feeling and energy that happens inside of our bodies as we experience these overwhelming and often unexplainable events. In Te Ao Māori, the Māori world, we use the term patu ngākau to describe the act of trauma. Patu means to strike. Ngākau refers to the seat of our emotions, our memories, and our mauri, our life force. So a patu ngākau is an assault to the very heart and soul of a person. For many people, trauma has been hidden, tucked away tidily, or perhaps even aggressively thrown away or discarded. But trauma demands that its presence is felt, and it continues to revisit us over time. The past is now happening in the present. Trauma is a little bit like that jack-in-the-box, just springs up out of nowhere, giving us this fright, shocking our system into the stress response where we become triggered. Trauma is that unwanted visitor that just shows up unannounced, ready to bring down the entire mood and tone of the party. And it inconveniently shows up time and time again in our closest relationships with the people that we love the most. Trauma is felt inside of our bodies as a constriction or expansion, as an energy or numbness, and it festers away inside of us, lodging between muscles and fascia. Trauma changes the way that we view, respond, react to, and interpret this world around us. Our story, our biography, starts to become our biology. And our biography doesn't just impact our biology. No, it impacts the biology of generation after generation after generation to come. Because you see, when a woman is pregnant, 3 generations share the womb. Mum is 1 generation. Baby inside mum's tummy, 2 generations. If that baby is a baby boy, he already has precursor sperm cells. If it's a baby girl, she is carrying all the oocytes or eggs that she will have for her entire lifetime. So any stress that mum feels, along with both mum and dad's unprocessed and unsettled stories, will be passed on to baby and baby's baby at the same time. Matt and Sarah Brown, in their groundbreaking book, She Is Not Your Rehab, share with us that children are good recorders, but they are terrible interpreters. And that is the legacy we pass on to our children and children's children unknowingly. It took 44 years before I first heard the words, "I love you," from my mother. After a conversation with her, I realized quickly that Mum never heard these words from her parents either. It's so hard to be what we can't see and to be the type of parent that's needed, even though that's not what we experienced ourselves as a child from our parents. And that's the legacy we pass on to our children. And if that's a legacy that was passed on to you, then it's time to break the cycle. And that is why trauma-informed practice and awareness is so vitally important and crucial for us all to understand, particularly for our parents, for our teachers and the education system, and also the Department of Corrections and our justice system, because all three can become very punitive very quickly if we lack an awareness and understanding of the importance of relational neuroscience, if we lack an understanding of the impact our biography has on our biology and the biology of generations to come, and if we are relying on the wiring and programming passed to us from previous generations. So let's start with reframing the words that our parents used, reframing the words that teachers used, and reframing the words that were transmitted and passed down to us from our ancestors. These words that weren't then and aren't now appropriate nor scientific. Words like naughty, difficult, disruptive, disobedient, defiant. Let's reframe these as dysregulated. Their brain and body has moved away from a state of mōrito, equilibrium, or homeostasis. They are now in a state of dysregulation. And it's not behavior. They're not choosing to. This is simply our body's response to overwhelming stress. Therefore, this is a stress response. And our stress response has been designed to keep us safe, even though it can be viewed and interpreted by everybody around us as being completely irrational. Our body is always trying to return us to a state of mōrito by any means necessary, and it will do so once it perceives that we are safe again. Dysregulation takes us out of connection and into either protection or disconnection. As an educator for well over 20 years, and with 10 years spent as a school principal, I would see on a daily basis how a student's dysregulation would in turn dysregulate us. We didn't have the words to describe what was happening back then, and we certainly weren't aware of what was happening inside of us physiologically at the time, but we had become triggered. Their dysregulation triggered something in us that brought all our past up into the present, where we would be standing there, physically and chronologically our age, but mentally and emotionally frozen. Frozen at the age we felt not seen, heard, or known. Frozen at that age where we felt like we weren't good enough, and frozen at the age where we felt like we didn't belong. We all regress to childlike states when we become dysregulated and triggered by others. And children are fantastic at alerting and signaling to us all of those unprocessed and unsettled parts of us. There are literally billions of children walking around this planet, but many are in adult bodies. So when we become dysregulated and triggered by others, a great strategy we can all use is to simply take a few steps back. By giving ourselves this time and space, allows us to move from the more reactionary parts of our brain, like our limbic system, the emotional brain, and back towards the safety of our social engagement system you possibly know as the cortex. We need the past to stay in the past, so grounding ourselves allows us to remain not just physically present, but mentally and emotionally present too. For most people, focusing on our breath through controlled and focused breathing allows us to re-engage with the more responsive parts of our brain, and simply by taking a few deep breaths. Haki roto, breathe in. Haki waho, breathe out. Haki roto. Haki waho. So once we've given ourselves this time and space, grounded ourselves to remain not just physically present, but mentally and emotionally present too, and we've breathed deeply to re-engage those more responsive, smarter parts of our brain, we can then step back in as our fully present adult self who is available to help co-regulate with a dysregulated other. Co-regulation happens through connection and safety. Co-regulation is essentially lending the calmness of our nervous system to a dysregulated other, which in turn regulates, calms, and soothes their nervous system, returning them to a state of maurito. In Te Ao Māori, the Māori world, we use pūrākau, our stories, to convey different ideas, concepts, and philosophies. In one of our pūrākau, i te timatanga, in the beginning, one of our atua, our gods, Tāwhiri Mātia, is engaged in the most epic of battles with his brothers. During these battles, his mother, Papatuanuku, takes hold of two of her youngest children, Haumea Tiki Tiki and Rongomā Tāne. She holds them, brings them close to her breast. She puts her hands across their eyes so they can't see the fighting. Whilst they don't see the fighting, they hear the fighting, and the vibrations of those battles echo throughout their bodies. Papatuanuku focuses on her breath, and with controlled breathing is able to regulate and calm and soothe her nervous system, which she then is able to pass to her two young sons, returning them to a state of maurito. The first instance of co-regulation in our pūrākau. Whanaungatanga, people heal people. We can rewire the brain and body. We can heal the imprint left by trauma on our ngākau, our heart and soul. And we can and we will rewrite and change the narrative. Self-awareness, self-reflection, sitting with our biography and unpacking it with compassion, not just compassion for ourselves, but also compassion for past generations too. When we do this, we make the invisible visible. We process it and we place it back where it belongs, in the past, where it shall remain. We speak with our inner child. We let them know they are safe, seen, heard, known, valued, loved. We tell them they're good enough, and we tell them that they belong. And we let our inner child know that they can rest now, because we are here as our fully present adult self. Those once repressed and suppressed emotions and feelings, felt, acknowledged, processed, settled. Those three words I didn't hear growing up as a child, those three words, I love you, are the words I share with my wife, are the words I share with my children, and are the words I share with my mokopuna, my grandchildren. Those three words, I love you, are the words my mother and I share with each other now in the present. The present, settled. Future generations, settled. The tupuna, the ancestors, settled. Cycle broken. Well done.